Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. Doomsday mom Lori Vallow Daybell deemed not mentally fit to stand trial as she awaits murder charges for the deaths of her 2 children. Why prosecutors say her religious beliefs motivated the killings. The fate of an Iowa farm worker charged with killing Iowa college student Mollie Tibbetts now rests in the hands of the jury. We break down closing arguments in the trial of Cristhian Bahena Rivera.
There weren't 2 other guys. That's a figment of his imagination.
The so-called Central Park Karen is suing her former employer, saying she was unfairly fired. Plus, friends of a woman missing for decades testify Kathie Durst was afraid of her husband, the millionaire real estate heir Robert Durst, and his alleged affair with Prudence Farrow, the inspiration for the hit Beatles song. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. The so-called Doomsday mommy has been found not fit to stand trial days after Lori Vallow Daybell and her husband were indicted for the murder of her 2 children and his late wife.
Can you hear
I need
me?
you to speak a little bit louder, Mr. Daybell.
Yes, I can hear you.
Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell made their initial appearances before an Idaho judge on Wednesday as a grand jury indicted them for the first time on murder charges.
The court finds that there's some exigent circumstances, as well as a motion that was made orally to me to continue the initial appearance by the defense.
The couple has been in jail since last year on charges of evidence tampering. The bodies of Lori's 2 children were discovered in June 2020, buried in Chad Daybell's backyard. Their autopsies have not yet been made public, but court records are giving new insight into why officials believe they were killed. According to the indictment, Chad, Lori, and Lori's brother Alex Cox conspired to commit murder between 2018 and 2020. Officials say they believed in an end-of-the-world doctrine needing to rid the world of zombies and the human bodies they inhabit. Lori reportedly met Chad in 2018 while Chad was teaching a class and gave her a rubric on light and dark spirits. Both were married at the time. In January 2019, Gilbert, Arizona police were called out to the home Lori shared with her then-husband, Charles Vallow. Body cam video shows Charles Vallow telling officers that Lori had left with the children.
She's lost her mind. I don't know how else to say it. She said, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers."
Lori and Tylee spoke with police later that day and said they left because Lori caught Charles cheating.
I got in an argument with my husband on the phone, and he was in Texas working, and I found some stuff that he'd been doing, so he was really defensive. And so I took the kids. We spent the night in a hotel because I knew he was coming home.
Lori went for a court-ordered mental health exam and reportedly was cleared. By July, Charles Vallow was dead. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, said he shot Vallow in self-defense.
What was he yelling at you about?
About my sister, because I'd broken up the tussle with them earlier. And he told me not to interfere anymore with them or I'd pay. And he came at me with a bat.
Prosecutors say in August 2019, Lori switched the children's Social Security checks to deposit directly into her own bank account. On September 1st, 2019, Lori moved to Idaho with the kids. Days later, JJ and Tylee had vanished. According to the indictment, between September 8th and 9th, Chad and Lori encouraged, commanded, or compelled another to kill Tylee. Around the same time, prosecutors say Chad increased a life insurance policy on his wife, Tammy Daybell. Then, on September 23rd, prosecutors say Alex Cox took possession of JJ. It's then the couple is accused of assisting in the killing of JJ. We're now learning that in the beginning of October 2019, Alex Cox is accused of trying to shoot Tammy. Tammy died on October 19, and at the time, it was ruled due to natural causes. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori married in Hawaii. In December 2019, Alex Cox died in his home. The medical examiner ruled his death due to natural causes. Investigators exhumed Tammy's body in December 2019, and the results of that autopsy have not yet been made public. Prosecutors are now alleging Chad had a role in killing Tammy.
Members of the grand jury deliberated and determined there is probable cause to believe the Daybells willfully and knowingly conspired to commit several crimes that led to the death of 3 innocent people.
And on Thursday, a judge stayed Lori's case pending a hearing of her mental fitness to stand trial. According to a new order, her attorney Mark Means requested a psychological assessment of his client in March. A licensed clinical psychologist determined Vallow Daybell is not competent and recommends restorative treatment. The state is contesting the report, and a hearing will be scheduled on the matter. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Mike Corespondent and Terri Austin. Terri, even the prosecution is contesting the results of Lori Vallow Daybell's competency results. What do you think of the results?
You know, I agree with Rob Wood here. He should contest those results as far as I'm concerned. When you think about the original charges against Lori, that was way back in February of 2020 for the misdemeanor charges for resisting arrest. She could have claimed that she was not competent at that point, or even the additional charges in June of 2020 after they found the bodies, saying that she helped to destroy evidence. So I think it's odd that they just only recently tried to get a request for a competency evaluation. And in fact, obviously they got it and they found her incompetent. But I think they saw the writing on the wall here. And I think they're preparing for these charges that were, you know, the indictment that did come down.
Mike, I can't believe I'm saying this. Let's put zombies and Viola's spirit aside. How is this going to affect Lori and Chad's case? Could the competency issue separate the cases? And does this create a change for the prosecution or defense's strategy?
It creates a whole new environment in which to proceed with this case, with so many more really unpredictable variations of what could happen. What I think, though, if I was the prosecutor in this case, I would not want to sever or separate these trials, try one person at a time, because although you have all the discovery in the case, all of us here have tried cases and know those reports take on a whole new meaning when you're confronting a witness and cross-examining them. And based upon that, it will be very difficult for them to do this separately, because if they have to wait for Lori to get ruled to be competent for trial, they would have had a preview of all the evidence in the first case. So I think they're going to wait till she's ready to stand and try it together.
I mean, I think these cases should be separated just as a defense attorney to make it stronger for them. So the opposite must make sense for the prosecution. Thank you both. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, the financial firm who fired the so-called Central Park Karen is in some hot water as she's now firing back. But first, the jury is deliberating in the murder of Mollie Tibbetts. We break down closing arguments on the other side of this break. We're back. A jury is now deliberating the fate of an Iowa farm worker accused of killing a college student and leaving her body in a cornfield.
She crossed paths with him, and it ended her life.
Iowa prosecutor Scott Brown says Cristhian Bahena Rivera murdered Mollie Tibbetts while she was out jogging. The defendant is accused of stabbing Tibbetts 9 to 12 times, shoving her in his trunk, and dumping her body under a pile of corn.
Mollie is threatening to call the police, and the defendant was angry. He says that. He tells us that. He also says when he gets angry, he blacks out. That's what he claims. That's what he told the police. The defendant, whenever they talk to him, they say, take us to her, and he does. Turn by turn. Takes him right there.
The defense told the jury that Mollie's death was tragic, but their client is not the real killer. They say investigators couldn't solve the case for weeks and singled out Bahena Rivera.
No murder weapon ever was discovered in this case. They don't have an eyewitness, but we dispute greatly that what they attribute to Cristhian Bahena as a statement can be characterized as a confession. This man, 5'7", 125-pound illegal immigrant, undocumented immigrant, gets angry and resorts to killing her, stabbing her 9 times. The evidence we do have about Cristhian Bahena is that he's not an angry man, that he's a family man, he's hardworking. He came to this country for a reason, and you can bet he wanted to stay in this country.
Before the jury heard closing arguments, the state called one last witness in rebuttal. Angenette Levy has that and more from Cristhian Bahena Rivera's testimony.
Cristhian Bahena Rivera's defense team has named Mollie Tibbetts' boyfriend as a potential suspect in her murder, so the state called Dalton Jack's supervisor to testify about his alibi.
Was Dalton Jack on the crew that was working in Dubuque on the bridge that crossed the river?
Yes, he was.
Nick Wilson testified he and Dalton Jack and their crew were more than 2 hours away from Brooklyn, Iowa, the night Mollie Tibbetts was last seen alive.
Did you and your crew, including Dalton Jack, go anywhere after work at 7 p.m. on July 18th of 2018?
No, we did not.
Did you go back to the hotel?
Yes.
All right. And did Dalton Jack go with you?
Yes, he did.
The defense says Dalton Jack gave different statements to law enforcement about what he did that night.
So you're not sure if he was in his room?
It's hard to remember. It was 3 years ago.
Cristhian Bahena Rivera testified 2 men forced him to drive around the night Tibbets disappeared after appearing in his trailer in sweaters and masks.
One of them was bigger and a little bit fatter, and one of them was about my stature and a little bit stronger, burly.
Bahena Rivera testified the masked men took off after leaving him in a cornfield with Mollie Tibbetts in the trunk, barely alive. He admitted he placed her body in the cornfield.
Do you remember being asked in the interview by Ms. Romero if you were covering for anyone?
Yes.
Cristhian Bahena Rivera testified that he never mentioned those 2 masked men to the police because they threatened to kill his ex-girlfriend and their daughter if he said anything. For Law&Crime Daily, I'm Angenette Levy.
Thanks, Angenette. Let's bring back criminal defense attorney Mike Corespondent and Terri Austin to break this all down. Mike, did the rebuttal witness have any impact for you? And do you think the prosecution maybe either did a misstep or a good calculation in calling them?
I think in the way this case was going forward, this was a good witness to call for rebuttal because it really eliminated someone. It said, you know, they could talk about this potential suspect all they want, but he had nothing to do with it. So I thought it was a good move.
Yeah. Now, Terri, did the defense's closing argument leave you with any reasonable doubt, or should we just be waiting for sentencing?
You know, based on the closing, I have no doubt, but I think there might just be a juror who has some doubt, and that could actually, you know, lead to not having a conviction here. So the defense's argument basically was that the prosecution had unlimited resources, so why didn't they look at other leads that they had no motive, that the defendant had no motive? And of course, he did have a motive. He himself said that he got angry. The defense also said there was no evidence, and there was evidence. There was a ton of evidence. There was blood in the trunk. So of course there's evidence. So I think that he's making these arguments. You know, one other argument he made was that the interrogation was 11 hours long, but none of that negates the fact that it was his client. He put the body in the cornfield. He said he did that. He showed them where the body was. So I have no doubt, but there might just be one juror who does.
And you only need just one for a hung jury, and that could be exactly what the defense attorney is trying to do. Mike, as a defense attorney, you know that. You just got to get one, right? And do you think they can find just one here?
I think so. I think they can. I think this defense attorney was very creative. He did a great job of separating all the circumstances and taking it apart. The only problem is when you pull the circumstances together, the case seems much more solid with the confession.
All right, let's see how this plays out. Like we said, the jury is still deliberating. Coming up on Law&Crime Daily, former neighbors of Robert Durst testify in court about the real estate heir's missing wife. Plus, the so-called Central Park Karen is now suing for racial discrimination. We break down the lawsuit against her former employer next. Welcome back. The so-called Central Park Karen is filing a lawsuit against her former employer alleging racial discrimination. Amy Cooper went viral in May 2020 for calling the cops on a black bird watcher. She's now suing her former employer, Franklin Templeton, for unlawful termination. The suit says Cooper called police because the man, Christian Cooper, was a, quote, overzealous bird watcher who targeted Miss Cooper in a feud between bird watchers and dog lovers, not because of his race. She was fired the next day, but claims she was not interviewed before being let go. The financial firms say they are sticking by their initial statement, which says they do not tolerate racism of any kind. She is seeking an unspecified amount of money for damages, emotional distress, negligence, and racial discrimination. A misdemeanor charge of false reporting was dropped after Cooper completed restorative justice sessions. All right, back to discuss this lawsuit by the so-called Central Park Karen is defense attorney Mike Corespondent and co-host Terri Austin. Terri, disgruntled employee or wrongfully terminated? What do you think?
You know, I think it's a well-written complaint, but I don't think it's going to succeed. You know, she's suing for race discrimination, and she's not in a protected class. And even if she were suing for reverse discrimination, she'd have to show that the decision made really was made in contrast to how the firm handled those not in her class or category. So I don't think that they will be able to do that. And I haven't seen that in the complaint. They mentioned one person, but that was it. She's also suing for harassment, and I don't think terminating someone just that alone is going to be successful for harassment. She's suing for gender, and you know, she'll again have to show that there were multiple people, men, who weren't treated like that. And she's also suing for defamation, and of course, you have to show that what was said was false and that the company knowingly made this false statement. So, well-written complaint, but I don't as yet see the facts supporting the allegations.
Yeah, I would tend to agree as well. Let me follow up with this one with you, Terri. I don't see the racial discrimination, but maybe it's an issue that the employer didn't check all of the boxes before firing her. So could it be a procedural issue rather than a racial issue?
You know, it could be a procedural issue, but if they didn't follow their handbook, then that's it. That's a problem. But unless they can show that they followed the handbook with other people in other categories beyond her category, then it's not an issue. So, you know, I don't think that even that failure to abide by their own policy is going to result in anything. Now, what she might be trying to do is get a settlement, and they could very well do that before they take it all the way.
Exactly. And I think with a lot of these things, and in New York, as we both know, it tends to be an at-will employment in this state. So if it's at will, they might not need to follow any procedures. Just say, hey, you got arrested for a crime of dishonesty, and we want you to go. But we'll keep eyes on this case and see how it plays out. Thank you very much, Terri. When we come back, we head to California where the neighbors of Kathie and Robert Durst testify. Was a millionaire real estate heir having an affair when his wife went missing? Welcome back. Millionaire real estate heir Robert Durst is on trial for the murder of his longtime friend, Susan Berman, in December 2000. Prosecutors allege that Berman knew about the death of Durst's first wife, Kathie, who has been missing since the 1980s, and that he killed Berman because she could go to the police. Friends of the Durst say he was having an affair with Prudence Farrow, the woman who's the inspiration for the Beatles song, Dear Prudence. Prosecutors also asked if Durst was violent towards Kathie in 1981.
I wasn't until she told me.
Okay. So I don't want you to tell me specifically what she told you, but I want to know, did you have conversations with her about it?
Yes.
Okay. And you became aware of it?
Yes.
And what period of time was this?
That was the summer of 1981.
Did you encourage Kathie to do something about this violence she was telling you about?
I did.
What did you encourage her to do?
She didn't want to report it, and I encouraged her to do so.
On cross, the defense asked Mayor about Robert Durst's behavior after Kathie disappeared.
My husband saw him. I was in my pajamas, so I heard the whole thing, but I didn't see him.
So he wanted to know if you folks knew where his wife was.
Yes.
Because you were a logical couple to ask since you lived next door, correct?
Yes.
And if you were missing, you'd expect your husband to have gone over to the Durst and asked, have you seen my wife, correct?
Yes.
So there was nothing unusual about Bob coming over to ask for help, was there?
It's hard for me to say it wasn't unusual because...
Well, not putting aside whatever you've read and whatever you think and whatever position you have, at the time, it would not have been unusual for a husband to come next door and ask you for help trying to find his wife, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's bring in Mike Corespondent and Terri Austin one last time. Mike, this is all still very circumstantial. Is any of this, at least for you, creating a path to guilt or innocence?
I'm looking for the path to relevance. This case has been I don't even, if you just listen to the case, you don't even know who the victim was, because it seems like it was Durst's first wife. I don't understand this case and how the rules of evidence and this judge is allowing all these kind of opinions by lay witnesses in, this kind of like asking her, like, what would your husband do? And did he come to you? I just don't see the relevance in this case. And I don't see why the prosecution wants to have all these built-in appeals.
Relevance, confusion of the jury potentially. Terri, my correspondence is kind of touching on potential appellate issues. I think the defense is probably thinking about those grounds as well. Do you see any viable arguments on appeal if Durst is found guilty?
Well, I think Mike just hit the nail on the head. There's no question that getting all of this evidence about Kathie Durst, about the fact that Morris Black was killed and he was, Durst acquitted of that, about all of these other unrelated issues as it relates to why we are here now. We are here now because of the murder of Susan Berman. So I think that that is a ground for appeal. And I also think the fact that we had a jury months ago, 18 months ago, and they waited and they're brought back. That is a huge ground for appeal as far as I'm concerned. The fact that they're not going to remember what happened and listening to this evidence again, it is a huge ground, I think, to move if in fact Durst is found guilty for appeal of this trial. It's just got so many errors.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I keep thinking this is an appellate issue, this is an appellate issue, this is an appellate issue. And not to sound horrible about it, it may be a moot issue because will Robert Durst make it through that appeal? Not quite sure. Terri, Mike, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us here at Law&Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.